Hello, hello. How's it going? How is it going today? Um, we're gonna kind of do a little bit of what we were doing last week. I feel like we made some progress in like the things that I wanted to look at. Um, but we left a little bit hanging. And again, I'm sort of time constrained, so I don't want to like dive into one of the larger topics today, at least. So I guess I kind of want to go through and just finish up that stream of thought, as it were. And now I guess where do we start? Let's see. Moving some windows around here. Let's just hop right on over to it. We looked at some plugins. We were going through the plugin list. I think we also continue to go through that same plugin list. But in a looking for sort of like a specific type of plugin. I've been calling it like alternative communication methods or plugins that sort of like use things that are slightly outside of the box, as it were. And we got a couple here. Let's go ahead and we can pull those up, and I'll get the list going. But first, we're going to look at the works. What was it? The plugins workspace in the Tauri org. I'm going to start off there. Also, didn't show up here, but Arnab, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. We had found a couple. Let's pull this down here. This was the. What? Why aren't you moving? Come on. Windows has been doing this thing where, or maybe it's just Obsidian, but like I can't grab here. I can't drag here anymore. I don't know if that's just like a thing with Obsidian now, but I have to like grab it right here. You can see two of them on that list. Nope, other way. We're going this way. The auth plugin and the plugin GraphQL. The plugin GraphQL was built, and as far as I can tell from the versions that it's, like in the cargo.toml, it was built for V1. It could potentially be updated for V2. We might take a peek at it though more closely and see if that even would make sense. But the Fabian, excuse me, who's part of the working group and does a lot for the project. They made this auth plugin, and we can dig into it a little bit and see what they were doing there. But what I think is sort of interesting about both, the biometric auth at the top and this plugin auth is that generally in a web browser, you would do it in a way where you're communicating between multiple servers, and it would do pop-ups or like redirects within the browser. That expectation is less common in apps, I would say. Normally you would see like a pop-up. So like functionally you get a different UX around logging into a thing. And some of that will potentially be like alternative communication. Some of that is like if you open up a window expecting somebody to put in a password or something like that, there might be other pieces of consideration there. If it's a different window, you need to potentially sync that state between multiple windows. That means it might make sense to start to push some of that state into the Rust side of things. There's different questions, or there's questions with different answers, maybe is the best way to say it, once we start looking at logging in within the context of an app. So I think that's gonna, we're definitely gonna go through, maybe not on this stream, but I think going through that would be interesting and helpful for folks. But I want to look at this, the plugins workspace, because we started digging into it at the end of the last stream. And I just want to see if there's anything else on there, or maybe you look at the issues of the pull request and see if anything else has been added there. That would be interesting to put on our list. And then I guess the two other bits are, in some ways, this is also just generically like potential future streams. We were talking about some local first projects that were of interest. I guess while we're doing of interest projects, I want to look at Beehive. We'll come back to that though and fill that in a little bit. So stick a pin in that. But first of all, plugins workspace. And we did a search like on GitHub just to see if anything was coming up, and I wasn't seeing too much. So we might, it's kind of a hard thing to search for. But we'll say maybe do a quick search for other plugins outside of what is listed there. And the last bit that I want to look at is take a peek at the IBC layer in Tauri v2. Now, it is very HTTP-like. So we might end up bumping that up the list depending on what we find. But I think a potential area of exploration is like, there's multiple ways you can communicate with the web browser. Potentially making use of those APIs or some of those ideas that are stemming from the web browser and using it as a way to communicate from Rust to your web view. There is, we've looked at WebSockets a little bit on stream, and there's been some work to use WebSockets as a way to communicate for certain situations more efficiently with between the Rust and the WebView layer. And I think there's a, I believe it's CAP. I don't know the full like name offhand, so I'll do that enough that it'll be a reminder. And one of the people that's, as far as I understand, involved with that is part of the Tauri working group as well. And they've done a bunch of interesting projects. But were discussing over social media that they're actually using WebSockets to do the communication. I don't know if that's an artifact of starting this in V1 prior to V2, but I think it's interesting. So, and I'm kind of happy to support their work. So, first of all, let's go ahead and I suppose we can say I like checking off boxes, so we're gonna check off a box. So first of all, let's go ahead and look at, come on, move, my friend. Tauri. I guess we can just go here. That'll probably be the quickest. Actually, we have it open right here because we were just looking at it, weren't we? So if you're unfamiliar with this, this is a list of projects. Curated as in, we make sure it's not like spam or whatever, but it is a user supported or otherwise user. We looked at this. I think it's user. Like users submit to it. So it's not like curated as in the sense of you need to know somebody to like get yourself in the door. Discord rich presence. Yeah, so we looked at this. But let's keep that open for the minute. Interesting. Peruse services manage. I mean, honestly, like, other than should we just go ahead and look at all these? There we go. So we'll look at what's upcoming on the list here quick. Okay. They don't have a link on the root. Okay. OpenAI images. Here we go. So, okay. That's an example. Run JS TS code with Dino Core engine. This was a newer thing, and I think shout out to Crab Nebula folks. I think they also wired up some of this as well. If we is this a integrations? Is this actually a plugin? Run plugin. Oh no, so like it's an example. This looks like it's a little bit more of an example, but he's Dino Core. So Dino is parts of it are written in Rust. I don't know if all of it is written in Rust. I don't remember offhand if they've changed over time. And it's been a minute since I looked, but this looks to be more of an example than an actual like plugin. But in this case, it's giving it some static content to otherwise bootstrap. So it imports a thing, and then they've got this bootstrap that is what actually triggers the call, I think, once it hits the web view. And this is sort of like in interesting ways blurs the line on Tauri was very much like web view and Rust, and like those were the two pieces, and you had some form of or functionality to otherwise communicate between those two like separate environments. If you look at something like Electron, those boundaries are less apparent, in part because you're operating in the same language, and there's trade-offs there. Obviously, it's same language means that you don't have to learn multiple languages, which is potentially a benefit. The downside is that you start having to like think a little bit more about like what context you're operating it in, since the boundaries are less apparent. So like depending on if you're doing more rendery versus more like client type code, it's going to dictate what you're importing or how you're importing or what libraries you're using. This is interesting because it looks like dino.inspect. Like it's doing Dino runtime things that appear to be operating in the browser. Wrapper execute invoke. Let's check out since this seems to be more of an example, we can check out probably their front end code. Yeah, so execute here's an invoke that does an alert. Interesting. So it's doing execute. It technically, as far as I understand, would happen in so it's actually using Rust core, or it's using Dino core as in like coming from the Rust side of things. So technically the code is still executing in Rust, but it's like using the Dino runtime. So that ends up likely being more inherently safe than if you were running like a Node.js server on the side as like a sidecar. And that's kind of why this is interesting, because if you can run code in Rust, but with a runtime that understands JavaScript, that's potentially an alternative to using something else that's written in Rust that can also execute or otherwise understand JavaScript or TypeScript. What else do we got here? Launcher retro ROM. Now that I understand what it is, this is looks like a paid app. macOS menu bar application for Homebrew. Also closed source, so we can't look at it. Oh, this is kind of interesting. Cross-platform video compression app powered by FFmpeg. What's interesting about that in general is that FFmpeg is not inherently Rust-based. So what I'm curious about is, was how are they doing it? Dbus, custom protocol. Okay. libfs. And here's the plugins. So the log plugin, Windows State. So it's seeming like cross-platform, as in it will log out a thing or it'll otherwise execute a thing. This is probably the important bit though. Here's an impl for FFmpeg app shell sidecar. So it is doing it's running FFmpeg sidecar, and that's how it ends up working, is what it appears to be. So it's taking file information and calling basically like a terminal. So it's in some ways calling the same command you could potentially do in a terminal, just with a nice UI over the front of it. So that kind of tends to be the two ways you end up using libraries like this. You're either putting a GUI over the top of like what you could potentially do in a terminal, or you're actually like generating or otherwise making or procuring bindings that work directly with it. So rather than running a sidecar thing and firing off like terminal commands to it, you can call the code directly if you have some sort of bindings. But those are a little bit harder to maintain or otherwise generate because you're working more directly with the code. Whereas in the case of something like FFmpeg, the public API is intended to be basically the terminal. So if you're using the terminal, that you're using effectively public API, the public APIs for FFmpeg, which means it tends to stay more compatible because breaking changes are pushed out in a way where that's the expectation. Somebody's using it through the terminal. So that's kind of cool. What else do we got? Trayifier. Cool. That's closed source, so we can't take a peek at that. Oh. Get unique ID, interesting. Okay. There's just a little helper thing. I think I've seen a bunch of those things pop up, which I think is kind of cool. Just like helper utilities or like dev utils or whatever. Well, I can appreciate doing that in a terminal. Sometimes it's kind of nice just to have a GUI over some of it. So if it's something that sort of like lives in the background, just in general, that idea is kind of neat to me. And we've done a bunch of streams sort of like on that topic, and like that is literally functionally the same. Or well, not the same, but as in like that same concept where it's a little app that kind of just lives in the background and I can call it up whenever I need it very quickly and dump information in there and kind of go on my way. Tool for managing Minecraft mods and mod packs with ability to use Modrinth or CurseForge. Pretty neat. So something like this is going to be more like file system operations. So I don't know that there's going to really be anything useful to look at here. And I know that because I know some Minecraft things and how they operate, and this is basically just like zip files effectively. And not quite, but like you're just moving files around and putting them in the right spots for Minecraft to understand. So a little productivity app here. GRCP. We took a peek at this last time. And it's using the Rust, the crate for Rust, discard rich presence. It's come up a couple of times now. I think we're actually going to add this to the list, just because it seems kind of interesting, but also it's potentially not using, like the default communication methods. So just to see how it's put together, we might dig into that a little bit more. Hackable HackMD desktop application, kind of nifty. Real-time code execution. So my assumption here is that what they're doing with this is that's kind of cool. So it's terminal-like, but it's just executing on the side. So it's not actually a plugin, but I'm just curious how they're doing that communication. I suspect that I suspect that what they're doing, okay, so they're using OXC. And this is in the JavaScript ecosystem. There's been sort of this move to adopt Rust as a way to write dev tooling for it. There's a few reasons for it. I think in part it's the speed and memory safety of Rust probably speaks to that, or gets around issues that have been seen with running lots of node services. There's inherently a startup time in Node, which honestly, when you compare it to Rust, your program can run and complete in Rust before Node even starts up in certain cases. It's gotten better. But also that wave is already like in motion. So there's a bunch of tooling that's being written in Rust. And why I find that particularly interesting for what we're talking about, we saw it with the Dino cores plugin or example before. And we're seeing it here where if we're working or we have available to us Rust in the back end of our app, we can start doing some very interesting like UIs over the top of this because we can use the Rust directly and we don't need to specifically depend on the terminal as like the way to interface with this Rust code. Some of this is also going to have like a plugin for, say, VS Code, where it can run and execute through VS Code. But this starts to give us other interesting uses. Tauri plugins felt interesting. So like Rusty script and OXC. Interesting. Yeah, Tauri plugins Svelte. So this I'm guessing is setting up some Svelte stuff. And then the rest is mostly happening through OXC and like spawning off a dedicated worker thread. So it's create a runtime, as in like JavaScript runtime for evaluating the script. And then this runtime has the ability to somehow communicate with. Let's see, it's a command. Yeah, so every time there's a how are they doing the communication? Transformed a result. So is this running every time you type? Dino runtime, V8 isolate, thread, safe handle. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Every time you type, there's probably some sort of debounce on the front end, and then it executes. Like the runtime in theory could potentially live around, or like be more longer lived, but also these pieces are starting to be built in a way where it's expected to potentially run in like a serverless type environment, in which case there might be some amount of like keeping that serverless endpoint and like the V8 isolate warm, but also it's expected to be able to start up quickly from cold and do its thing and then shut down. So it's kind of being built in a way where this type of spawning off a thread and just doing the thing and then killing it right away is probably more performant than you just expect just off the top. Yeah, so but we're doing a thing with a timeout, with a 2-second timeout. So honestly, like it probably feels pretty good, and I mean they've got a little video here, so I mean we can see, but when you type, it's not executing every time. There's some level of like debouncing or or throttling or something. And it's executing every line too. So there's going to be some level of parsing the thing, executing each piece. But like it goes pretty fast because you're not going to be writing a whole ton of code in here. And again, these V8 isolates are built in with the expectation to start up and shut down quickly. All right. So I don't think there's anything else that we want to specifically put on our list here from those. I guess with that being said, we can say plugins workspace open PRs. And we will cross it right off the list. And then we're going to go through the rest of the list here. And we'll continue through our to-do list. We had started looking at this last time, and there's going to be a bunch of pieces that I don't think are valuable for us to go through in the scope that we're looking at. In general, I think did we look at the awesome RPC? We're going to add some of these to the list. We might have looked at them already, but yeah, okay. So there's plugin MQTT. Let's add these to our list. Even if we've opened them up or looked at them before, I would kind of like to dig into them a little bit more potentially. So plugin GraphQL, that's the one that is already on our list. Honestly, at this point, we should probably start marking some of these as like V1 versus V2. Okay. Tauri file drop, update Cloudflare. Oh, that's kind of nifty. Automatically interface with the Tauri updater. I'm actually, for other reasons, curious about the Cloudflare updater, but yeah, here's Cap. We'll go ahead and open it up so I don't have to go searching later. But let's see. Generate lo-fi music, interesting. Okay. Some more clients. A viewer. None of this is. I'm guessing most of these are going to be. We're halfway through the list here. I suspect most of these are going to be more like examples if you look at them. I highlighted it because Crab Nebula is shown up here. They've done a lot of work with the project, and a whole bunch of their team at Crab Nebula is part of the core Tauri team. Organize and execute. Nice. Okay. I think that's Yak closed sourced. It might be. There's definitely like we have the closed source label, and we have the paid label. I'm pretty sure Yak. I don't remember if Yak is actually closed source or not, but they have like a plan available that you can pay. So there might be a free tier, but it might also be paid. But the reason I bring that up is because in general, it's not easy to maintain a list like this, and that's where the curated comes in. Because just because somebody puts something on the list doesn't mean it's something that like the status of it or what it works with or if it is still being updated. That doesn't automatically update, so you kind of have to like continue to go through the list on an ongoing basis. And some of those, like maintenance, looking at issues, looking at this kind of stuff, bits, I would like to do a little bit more of that on stream, just to expose y'all to it. But also, it's interesting to go through and talk through some of these bits, but also it needs to be done. And we can kind of kill a couple birds with one stone, where I can talk about it and look at it, and we can, y'all can ask questions or whatever. But then also we can push some effort upstream to Tauri in general and help out where we can, because otherwise I have a hard time throwing a whole ton of time at the Tauri project in general. This ends up being a lot of the ways that I've been able to help the Tauri project, besides all the stuff I've done in the past and being a part of the board. But at some point it just gets really difficult to put a lot of time and thought into the actual code unless you're constantly in that code. And in which case, especially when the project is moving fast or parts of the project are moving faster, I kind of don't want to be a blocker because my time is a little bit more sporadic than some other folks. But anyways, all right, finance. Gaming. Yeah, and a lot of these are going to be like, yeah, here's another mod manager. Some more mod managers. A lot of those I would presume are going to be very much like moving files around effectively. Because if you think about games implementing mods or implementing plugin systems, they're operating on the fact that like if there's some like predefined expectation, as in you put files here and we will just load them for you and attempt to, or otherwise presume that is your mods or your plugins that you want running, or at least available to turn on. So most of these are going to be like an easy way to download and update and maintain and put them in the right spots. So as in like these are neat implementations of a Tauri app, but not really in the scope of what we're interested in specifically looking at. Ooh, that's kind of cool. I've got some bit of a background in seismic, and that is interesting to me just in general. Oh, this is also cool. I'm gonna open that up strictly just for the intent to look at it later, because share that with the kiddo. They've been into the solar system and stuff lately. All right, networking. This could get kind of interesting. Rustdesk, I actually use this for my own personal use cases, and it's a pretty neat app. And oh, this is kind of cool. I don't. Well, we can actually look at it real quick. So some of these are going to be like, it's an app. We don't really. There's nothing that we could pull from it other than like seeing how they've implemented it. So like if we look at the lib, they've got clap in here, Tauri APIs, info, service daemon. Yep, MDNS. And they've got trunk in here, so they've got Leptos for the front end. Okay. I'm going to keep that open for looking at that in the future. What else do we got? We got some writing stuff. I don't know that there's going to be too much here that we can look at. Productivity. Google Task Desktop Client. I didn't realize that this might actually be one of those that, like, is Google Tasks still around? Highly unlikely that a Google thing still exists. Shh. I'm guessing it's at an API. But either way, I have a feeling that some of the, like, Google doesn't have the best reputation for not killing things. We'll put it that way. Search, security, social media. Some of these are interesting because they're built on like this one's on IPFS, which is more involved to set up or otherwise operate than just your typical service. But I don't know that there's going to be anything that we want to dig into there. And then we start to get into the utilities. File transfer. Voice chat overlay. Random password generator. Oh, this is kind of cool. I'm opening that for future me. Partly just because I'm curious. And let's see. I think that's about the end of it. So we're gonna go ahead and well, let's look at these few that we opened up. I'm pretty sure we opened up this up last time, and I can't remember. Was this a? Yeah, okay. This was a little bit older. They had been working on Vitor or Victor is it Vitor that's in the working group? I'm mixing it up. I recognize the name, and I think it's because okay, good. Is there handle Victor in Discord? Is that what's goofing me up? Either way, part of the working group. We looked at this, I think, last time. Also, hey Nicola, good to see you. Rounded corners. Was it in there? I just closed everything. Boop 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 boop. Oh yep. Rounded corners. Ah, is that a? Oh, that's a utility. Rounds the corners of your window screen. Nice. Nice. I like it. Okay, so this is more so. This was built around Tauri 1.0. I'm curious, like, in general, does RPC still have a place in I just want the default branch. Okay, fine. Just copy. I'm curious if it, like, doing RPC in current or otherwise future. Now I can drag here. Windows. So the IPC layer is a little bit of a, it's like using HTTP, but not really. And does that still make sense when you're doing RPC? So I'm just kind of curious. I don't think we're gonna. I suspect GraphQL, RPC, and web like those specific implementations we might just want to look at like as a whole stream. CSS magic, yes. Where's nice. Okay. Okay, specifically Tauri 2.0, and it is doing. They're connecting to test Mosquito. MQTT is it's not WebSockets, but I kind of feel in some ways like if you squint, it's kind of like WebSockets. There's differences obviously, and apparently I have hiccups, so hopefully that doesn't come through. But actually I'm curious what web view source. I'm curious, like, are they this is clearly a plugin, so its folder structure is a little bit different. What are they using? Tokyo run rumq nice rumqttc. It's more like soap. Yeah, it's pretty clean. I'm sorry. Let us pull this open. I use a MQTT in bunch of my like IoT devices end up communicating to it. But like I haven't support for WebSockets. Interesting. I haven't actually had to do any implementations or anything with it. That gosh, the last time I touched soap, I mean, I think the last time I looked at doing anything with soap was like 2012. So like anything that I had known at that point is now out of my brain. And honestly, like MQTT is sort of in the same vein. An async Tokyo event loop, which enables users to send and receive MQTT messages in correspondence with the broker. Dreamweaver days? No, not quite. Well, maybe. I mean, by that point, I was not touching Dreamweaver. Like the last time I touched Dreamweaver was 2007, maybe. I think that's the last time I looked at Dreamweaver. That was back before I knew enough dev that I could whip up a web page and just writing the code raw, or whatever equivalent of it is now these days. But it's like Dreamweaver was, if you're unfamiliar, think like Squarespace before Squarespace existed is probably the way that I would describe it. Squarespace is like the online version of it now. It got the job done. I can't say I made the prettiest websites with it, but they got the job done. I don't know, like there's not it's all just connecting to a thing and doing a thing. So there tends to be kind of like high level group where you have keep the connection open type communication methods, or you have the do a thing and then close the connection type connections, which is a little bit more HTTP. You start to get into HTTP 2 or 3, and that gets a little fuzzy because I think it's HTTP 2 will keep the connection open so as to, or potentially, so as to allow you to do like save on that handshake cost and be able to handle multiple like responses in parallel. So it makes it easier to do, 10 calls to the same endpoint rather than having to make sure all your stuff is bundled into a single thing where you can keep the number of calls down. Alex, good to see you. How's it going? So I'm definitely curious. Like, there is very much use cases for MQTT. Like, it's not gone, but I'm in the web, like in the web dev area, the ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. I definitely haven't seen this come up much, if at all. So I'm curious what kind of use cases you could see from this. So we'll add it to the list because it definitely checks the box for alternative communication methods. Whoop. Okay, sure, fine, we can cut. And part of like when we would dig into otherwise look at these, there is potentially going to be a difference between, are we doing communication within the Rust side of things, or is it purely WebView? Like if it's purely WebView, it's probably relying on web tech, and there might not be too much that's worth exploring because it's just operating in the same way in your app as it would in a browser, which is not invalid, but it's not terribly interesting to like dig into. I'm doing well enough. I'm definitely like, if I don't know if you've noticed, I'm mousing like across myself. Don't get old. I'm pretty sure it's because I slept a weird like 3 weeks ago, and I think I like pulled something in my back or something, and now I don't know, I like pinched a nerve or something. It's don't get old. Okay, alarm. Nice. Good to see you. Yeah. I've got a couple of shorter videos. And it's definitely on my radar. Some of it is I like Tuck and DL, and experimenting and exploring is for what I'm doing and looking to accomplish. And as we discuss, the bar for me is lower, so it's easier to be consistent with doing streams. But I very much understand that that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And yeah, fast recovery, old man. Thanks. I actually, as a bit of an excuse, I'll come back to that. Shorter form videos. So I've got 2 out. I would like to do more, but it takes more effort, and I don't want to take away from doing my streams either. So, maybe more effort is a little bit relative. It's a different type of effort, and I just need to give myself the time to do it. And life has not been terribly forgiving lately, so I haven't gotten as many out as I want. It is definitely on my radar, though. If you've got a topic or anything, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the comments or whatever. Well, getting a good scope to video is very important, especially on YouTube. So figuring out like what I want to do very specifically is a big part of that effort. And then taking the time to write it. Like once I get that far, if I'm able to script it all out, actually recording it and editing it is not nearly as like a significant amount of time as it could be if like once I put the effort into it. But some of the videos that I've done that are a little bit more like a stream, they take a lot longer to edit because I need to somehow compress all my thoughts into a reasonable amount of time, and I can't make myself talk faster other than or like make the content more dense after the fact. So it putting the time up front is needed. Anyways, yes. Long story short, yes, I agree. I don't want to take away from the streams, but also I do want to put out more shorter videos. 5, 10, 15 minutes is probably what I'm shooting for. But anyways, the old man recovery thing. Right now I've got a key crown. I've swapped out keycaps and such. We actually did that on stream a while ago. Was that a year ago now? That might have been a year ago now. I don't dislike it, but also like posture wise and whatnot, it's not the best. So I got a split keyboard. It's shipping currently. Hopefully I get it a little bit later this week, and you know, we'll see how slowly or how fast I get into typing on the thing. So I'm excited for that. I'm hoping that will help because it's I think most of it's back related. It has presented itself in like tingly carpal tunnel like symptoms, which was worrying at first. I mean, it still is, but I don't know. Back issues aren't any better, really. It's just a different type of issue, and I'm hoping that will help a bunch. Anyways, enough about getting old. So we got a couple others, and it looks like they've done a few of these. There's UDP, TCP, and I'm guessing they are very much plugins. And they all seem to be very much around the idea of V2. Or well, they seem to be specifically intended for V2 from this person, which is I mean, you know, it's fine. This is using, what are we, TCP? So it's probably just using Tokyo? Really? Commands, desktop. And so what's interesting about this is, so like there's the connect. And it's a TCP stream. Sockets? So it's not like TCP as in plugin TCP. Interesting. Let's see if we can get a bit of a diversion here. Let's look at I mean, we're basically done with this. Yeah. Let's check that off. We're gonna say, let's look at TCP versus HTTP versus GRCP. That looks weird. Why does that look weird? Versus TCP, HTTP, GRCP. I guess webs. UDP was the other one that I wanted to do. Let's take a quick peek at that. And some of this is going to be like, UDP tends to be more, I don't think that's technically a web thing. Like I don't think there's any web implementation of UDP. Oh, okay, I'm wrong. It's often used for time sense. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. The place where I've used UDP is actually like more like communicating between processes. So and the reason we were using it was because, you know, it speedier communication. Let's look at a little bit of I mean, well, this is useful. I don't know how much we're going to actually derive from this. Some of it is just like the more bits you send, the faster or slower it will go. And all right, thanks for stopping by, Alex. Good to see you. So like DNS, what DNS is doing, it makes sense to you do that. And like DHCP, there's going to be use cases where being sensitive to that speed will dictate which type of protocol you use. But also, here's a comparison of UDP versus TCP. Having order and reliability is important in certain cases. And there's handshakes that happen with some of these protocols, which is part of what, like if we look at here, IPv4 pseudo header, like checksum, I'm guessing is part of the handshake. Oh, this does have a checksum. Source, destination, zeros, protocol UDP length. Okay, so we're basically snipping off the top of it. And that, like having this available is useful for some situations because being more specific about the handshake is important. And like the order of them is also important. So like if you're getting, like streaming a web page or something like that, getting those values out of order would potentially affect how the thing renders. But when you're doing more like events and you just need to like send the information off, and the order of it or if it even arrives matters less because you're sending them so frequently. So like if they miss a message, they're going to get another message with another update. So like it's not the end of the world. A little bit bigger deal, when you're trying to grab a web page. So that like and that comes back around to where did we see it? The UDP provides checksums for data integrity. It has no handshaking dialogues and thus exposes user programs to any unreliability of the underlying network. So if you need that error correction and the order matters, you need to put more information in there to ensure that it can be like recreated on the other side of the whatever you're streaming to. So like a real-time video where you miss packets or they go out of order, it's just rendering the next frame, so like it doesn't matter too much. Like if things start hitching or you start having network issues, it's just going to show the whatever last frame it rendered, and that's where you get the like robot staccato freeze frame kind of thing. It just renders it as soon as it gets a new like piece of information. So like those systems, it makes sense for that kind of thing. Yeah, it is stateless, suitable for a very large number of clients. So the question is, when we look at these, there's RPC, there's TCP, and are these all? And this is part of it too. Like, they don't specifically say it, at least at the bottom. A custom invoke system for using a localhost JSON RPC WebSocket. We did. Okay. This is actually how we were communicating, I think, with the WebSocket server in OBS, which was 2 streams ago, I think. And like functionally you're communicating. So like there's going to be important bits on implementation in between, but on one end of the system and the other end of the system, you're trying to send information, and functionally you're either getting the full response or you're getting it in pieces. So like, we were using WebSockets with, I don't know if it was RPC specifically. I don't remember what the spec was offhand, but like it doesn't really matter if it was RPC or not. Like we just were following whatever it told us to do. We were sending events and getting them back, and we were connecting over the WebSocket API from the web view. So like, but functionally it was just we were getting events in, and it didn't really matter how we were doing that connection. But what matters as far as like when we're building this is if we're running something locally, that's potentially a way for folks to infiltrate that app. Like if this is literally running a service that something on the network can connect to, think if you run this app on your computer and you go to a coffee shop, that's the kind of stuff that you kind of need to think about. And that's part of what has informed the like default of like official way to communicate from the web view to the REST side of things. But it's interesting to understand why or when to use these. And some of this that we're going through, it's kind of with the intent of like, we have control over both ends and the bits in between. So just because we have some expectation of like communicating from here to here doesn't mean we can always also control the parts in between. And that's basically what Tauri is doing with its current IPC layer. Is it's making it's relying on the fact that the web view knows how to communicate over a certain method, and then just intercepting it and interpreting it directly. But again, like these are more about, it's a specification that says how these pieces of data are, otherwise like packed and sent off. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to have a service running on both ends, or having a client and a service. We have options there, and that's part of why I wanted to like look at this, because many of these plugins are likely going to be more so built around like running running like a local host thing, which, not to say that it's inherently a bad thing to do, but it's something to keep in mind. But it also can inform like this, we could potentially see some of these protocols be used in like a v3 or v4 potentially, if it means that we can save on bytes because we have some like inbuilt assumptions on how we're building the thing. But also like, if the browser is not built with the expectation to handle that protocol, then you need to write the code to allow it to do that. Which is why using sort of the default HTTP expectations is helpful, because you don't need to align those expectations on both ends. All right, we're gonna add all 3 of these to the list, and then I think that probably is going to conclude our little search here. Hope I got that on the list already. I'm not gonna bother pulling it down. It's just copy pasting. I did. So where are we on? Kind of went through that. we got maybe 10 more minutes, a little bit less. I think what we end up doing is we take a look at why are you not letting me drag? Why can I not drag? Wow. Why is it so far off? I don't understand why it's doing that. Like, some drag target is odd, and the version of React Spectrum I have installed here, I think. All right. Let's take a look at the cap video recording because it's sort of like on topic of what we're talking about. I don't recall what they're doing and if that's closed source or not, but we'll take a quick peek. But I know they're doing some interesting things there because it's specifically using video. So that, that sensitivity that we talked about before. But I think let's take a peek at the existing IPC layer. I think that comes on a further stream where we look at how it's currently implemented and what we could potentially look at for other like options for communications. Like, would it be possible to bake some of this into an actual like WebView plus Rust API within Tauri for these like very specific, serialization or otherwise data, like anything that's sensitive to timing would start to fall into the maybe we need to use a custom situation for this. Okay. I'm guessing this is just using like Wrangler and based off of some information pushing some stuff up. And it looks like they haven't had a chance to give it attention for V2 yet, which I understand that happens. Okay. Let's take a look at what else do we have on the list here? Quick search for other plugins outside of what is listed there. We kind of did that last time. And like we still have this tab up. I don't know that there's going to be too much more that we can find. And some of these are going to start to get into, we have mobile support now. That opens up the ability to, well, that opens up the possibility of more plugins because there's more situations or use cases there. I think we're going to have a hard time searching for it though. We almost need like a Tauri plugin type thing here. We'll come back to that thought though. Maybe another future thoughts. Okay, so cap is, let's see. Yeah, you can see there's a few potentially familiar faces if you're familiar with so Brendan is, they don't actually have it on their profile, but I think they're officially part of the working group. And then we got a couple of contributions from other folks that you might see familiar. Lucas, you don't have anything in your profile here. Actually, that's their work account specifically. So in cap, they've got what do we all got in here? Local Docker. Cap complexity. Complexity. What is that? Local S3 storage. Okay. Do they have another link to? No, okay, nothing. Oh, they're using solid. Nice. Drizzle ORM. I don't see the here desktop maybe. Here we go. Okay, they got some nesting going on. Now they might end up having the Discord bot. Do they really have is that their personal Discord bot? Yeah, it probably is. I would say if they have a Discord bot for Kappa, so that would be pretty nifty. Let's look at their cargo.toml. A bunch of plugins, that makes sense. And this, like the tray starter that we set up over a whole bunch of streams, I guess about a year ago is about when we started really digging into that. A lot of these we're feeling like they're going to be potentially common between plugin positioner. Did we set up deep link? I don't remember if we put it in there either. But that's why we had originally set it up, was because a lot of these pieces felt like they were going to be common between all of them. So it'd be nice to have something that was easier to like grab all those potentially common pieces. Scap is part of the workspace. FFmpeg. I'm actually curious how they're doing FFmpeg. And Mac, Windows, specific dependencies, and relay stuff. I'm suspecting that it's part of the crates where they're doing some of this work, because nothing's specifically jumping out at me as like Tokyo.workspace. I don't know specifically where they would keep those communication protocols. But if we look at perhaps, there's a lot in the source directory. We'll see what loads. I tried to click on lib and I think I clicked on main. Let's look at their setup here real quick. Ooh. Production apps. It takes some effort. You can see they're using Specta, which is probably quite helpful for an app of this size. Editor instance. Here we go. Here's our main builder on window event, recording things. I'm specifically interested in how it is communicating. So I've got all the plugins, state, some information about Windows. It's like a multi-window app. Interesting. Fake window. So we have this do some state management. I think app.manage for app state. Checking permissions. And this is interesting because rather than relying on the user to confirm, or if so this was a question previously in the case of the web view where you're asking for permissions from the user to do a specific functionality like access the microphone. If they click deny, how do you rectify that if they intended to click accept? That answer is not. The like resolution of that is awful. is the short of it. So like this is an interesting way to go about it. What if we just have a separate window that's confirming that you're okay with it before basically preventing the user from clicking no, and then otherwise never being able to use your app without going through a whole bunch of effort or you writing some workaround for each system. Okay, so we do a bunch of like listening and then otherwise acting on those states. On window events and run window handles, and here's like a sign in. So they got a sign in window and a settings window. And this like check out the work that they're doing. But like this is very much a production app. So there's a lot going on, and they're using the windows in a way that I think is rather effective. And like these bits are the thing I think that are interesting to like dig into. Hey, good to see you. No, I'm forgetting. Is it? Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I know we had this discussion. It's Rude Rush, right? Rude Rush? Or is it Rud Rush? Rude Rush? Rud Rush. I'm pretty sure it's a Rude Rush. Let's hope my memory is serving me correctly. I really need to like write this stuff down. Speaking of to-do lists, and what time do we got? Okay, we got a couple more minutes, and I actually need to get going here. First time, Rude Rush, great. Yes, I remember correctly. Good to see you. Good to see you. I'm like, I know I asked the last time, and I'm like, should I don't have the like hotkeys. Well, you're just gonna be a separate part of the note for the moment, and I'm gonna set up a better system so as to remind myself. Rude Rush. That will be the random note that I will probably forget about, and then next time it comes up, we'll hopefully not have this discussion again, and I'll just remember. But that will be my prompt to get better at it. All right. Communication. How are they doing the communication? So they got a whole bunch of windows going on here. If we look at maybe their UI, we could potentially see components. Do they have a table input form? I mean, they might not actually have some of the UI in here, but I'm not seeing anything that it would be pointing to handling video. Nav menu. You have a very specific problem. I've got like 3 minutes. So maybe drop something in the Discord and the thread. And if it's something quick, I could answer it there. Otherwise, we could potentially pick up the question next week. Sorry, but I do kind of have a hard stop. Meetings have been kind of getting scheduled all over the place and not been helping me out much as far as being consistent. I'm not seeing a video thing. Audio GPU converters. I know that like I've seen them talk about on like on Blue Sky. Do I have it up? Brendan, yeah, I do actually. Here. This will be what we have to look at for right now. RGBA frames via WebSocket. Yeah, I'm sorry. What? So, and this is the bit. They're trying to render things like the video in a canvas, and yeah, throughput ends up being an issue. And like that's where these sort of like alternative use cases start to come to mind. And like if we could potentially bake that into or make that an option, I think that would be really interesting. But as I understand it right now, everything that I've seen is implementing this through, basically running like a sidecar or something like that. But I think we're gonna have to leave it. Uncaught. Oh, that when I try to make a tray app with the JS, you get the yes. That needs to be in your permissions. There's a like permissions.json type file where you would need to add the default window icon as an permission option in there, and the app allow default window icon is you need to have it as one of the items in there. I might have an example of that. This to-do app, I can cross this off. This to-do app, we I want to say like 3 or 4 streams ago, as I was finishing bits up, we ran into that, and I had to add that on there, I think. But yeah, otherwise feel free to drop a link, and I might have a snippet that I could send you where it shows up in this specific app. But otherwise, I think that's what we're gonna have to call it. Hopefully I can get some of these other streams scheduled, and we can look more deeply at some of these communication methods, and some of the other plugins. And I do want to get back to some of the local first stuff, but we've gotten to the point where many of those are going to take more effort or more time to like dig into, which hasn't been possible the past couple weeks, unfortunately. So I will try to work through this schedule stuff and get things scheduled. But we have a bunch of like topics and interesting bits that I want to talk through. And I think that could potentially lead into next work, or getting y'all interested in pushing some code up to the main repos, which would be great to see. I part of me wonders if some of these areas that we've been looking into could potentially be I mean, it wouldn't necessarily have to be part of V3, but like big changes that could be a marketing next version. That gets into the whole December thing, but that's not it today. I gotta get going. I got a meeting right now. I'll catch y'all later. Have a good rest of your week. Happy Tuesday. I will see you next time. Bye.